Hi everyone, and welcome back to Health Kick with Dr. K. Today we are talking about insomnia, and I've got DJ Della with me today in studio. And I was just telling him before we started that this topic actually kind of stresses me out because every year I've talked about this. Probably this is my second year talking about this, and every year there's new research that comes out, and that part is very exciting. But it just reinforces how much sleep is so important, and that if we're not prioritizing it, there are negative health consequences for us down the road. And so, anytime I'm getting up close to doing this podcast, for some reason my sleep goes sideways, and I'm on like week 2 of like not great sleep. And so anyway, so I'm like thinking about my topic, and I'm thinking about all the negative consequences, which is like stressing me out, which then is obviously other negative consequences. Anyway, hopefully me talking about insomnia and sleep deficiency and things like that isn't overly stressful for you, but then just opens your mind to thinking about your sleep and making it a big priority as you're moving forward and learning more about it. So insomnia, the inability to sleep, and there are different degrees to which the severity of that can happen. So it can be that you're having trouble falling asleep. It can be that you fall asleep totally fine, but then you wake up several times in the night, or you just stay awake for a huge chunk of time. So all of these different types of ways that they show up is very disruptive to us. So although this is a common problem, this is not normal. So if any of those sound like you, this is something that you need to sit down and investigate. And I mean, I'm sure you've done it. I know I've done it. Just pride ourselves on how much we got done with so little sleep, right? Like, oh, we pulled an all-nighter. We did all this work, and sometimes, I mean, you do what you got to do. But let's brag about how much sleep we got, right? Let's switch that narrative instead of how much we got done on so little sleep and how tired we are to, man, I'm so rested and I was so ready for that day, and my mood was great, right? And I think this will have the ripple effect of us not relying so much on stimulants. So not relying as much on caffeine, not relying so much on any type of alertness medications, whatever those may be, sleep medications. These are things that we want to start putting aside and start using our routine and what we have learned about sleep insufficiency and helping it to move forward. So in my practice, although my focus is in sports medicine, I do treat a lot of chronic stress and also insomnia. And I don't love that people have insomnia, but I love how the treatments affect them, because it's such a instant, response. Like, you do the treatment and then you say, hey, how was your sleep? And then they're like, yep, it was good, it was great, it was horrible, whatever the result. And then you can change the treatment plan based on that. So some of the reasons that the folks that I talk to in practice, the reason that they're not sleeping, stress is a huge one. So as soon as they're ready to hit the pillow, then they're thinking of all the tasks they have to get done, the lists, what's happening tomorrow, what are they worried about at work? And so then it produces that tired but wired sensation. You're physically and mentally exhausted, but your body is still like, go, go, go. Another reason is sleep apnea. So this is a diagnosis where for short bursts of time during the night, you actually stop breathing. And so if you have somebody that is sleeping beside you, they would describe it that you are either snoring a lot, or that you'll just get really quiet and then all of a sudden have like a huge gasp of air. And so what that does, that lack of oxygen pulls you out of sleep because your brain is like, whoa, what is happening? I don't have oxygen. Like, we need to figure out how to breathe here. So if ever you've woken yourself up snoring, or somebody that's sleeping beside you has said, hey, like, you're really snoring a lot, or, you're waking me up with these huge gasps that you're doing, that's a good time to get a referral to a sleep study. So how you would do that is you would meet with your medical doctor or go to a walk-in if you don't have one, and then say, these are the symptoms I'm having. And then along with, obviously, that is like extreme exhaustion, falling asleep while driving, falling asleep while doing a task. Those are the types of things that you'll start to experience, because at that point you have that chronic insomnia where you're getting pulled out of that deep sleep. So go for that referral, and then they'll send you to a sleep study clinic. Basically, they hook you up to some equipment, they monitor you while you're sleeping, and then they tell you how many times a night that you stop breathing and for how long. And then you might get a machine that's called a CPAP, which is essentially a mask that delivers oxygen over the course of the night and helps to reduce how many phases you have with those gasps of air that you're not breathing. So stress, sleep apnea, eating late is another one, which people don't necessarily associate with a poor quality sleep. It's just something that I've noticed that, if they're at a friend's house or they're going to a party and, they're eating late, that night their sleep is not great. So the interesting thing about eating late is that not only is it affecting your sleep and your ability to fall asleep, because a lot of times if you're feeling full, you can't lay down because maybe you have acid reflux, or you just feel that really uncomfortable full feeling. The other thing with eating late is that all the blood is pooling to your gut, and so when you're sleeping, you're actually wanting to have that filtration system in your brain so that all the dead cells, like any damaged cells, like anything like that, can be filtered out of your brain. And so when that's not happening, that affects not only your sleep quality, but also long term can be associated with Parkinson's, with dementia, with other Alzheimer's, like things like that. So you just need to be aware that eating late, once in a while, fair enough, you might have an event to go to, but overall, it really truly does impact your sleep. The next reason that I find that, again, people don't necessarily associate with it impacting sleep, but that it does, is alcohol. And so, a lot of people, their tendency is to, is drinking socially, drinking at night. They go to a friend's house, they go to a bar. These things are usually happening at night. And unfortunately, what happens is the later you have those drinks, the longer the impact is on your sleep. So you're not able to get into a deep sleep. You're not able to get into REM sleep. And so those are that's the phases of sleep that are the most restorative for us. And so what alcohol does is, although you may feel sleepy or you may pass out or, any of these types of things, alcohol is actually impacting that quality of sleep. So you may be asleep for X amount of hours, but it's not actually great sleep. I mentioned a little bit earlier about the caffeine piece. So, actually caffeine and nicotine. So both of those are stimulants. So caffeine, I think, is generally associated, like people know that that's a stimulant. But nicotine, I think people associate more so with being relaxing, whereas it is not. It is actually putting you on high alert. And so what's probably making people feel relaxed is the fact that they're doing deep breathing. So nicotine, caffeine, as I say, both are stimulants. The other reason for poor sleep is a rotating shift. So anyone who's doing shift work, nurses, doctors, police officers, grocery store clerks that work in 24/7 stores, those are people that are really being affected, especially if it's switching from days to nights or even afternoons. Illness or pain is another reason. So, sometimes if you have a cold and your nose is stuffed up, you can't get that proper sleep. Or if you've injured yourself and you just can't get comfortable in any position and the pain wakes you up, which is unfortunate because when we are sick or in pain, those are the times where we really do need that good quality sleep. The other one is kids waking them up. So obviously you don't necessarily have control over what the little people are doing, or if they have, they're sick, they're waking up, they're having a nightmare. But hopefully, as you get into the routine of helping your sleep habits improve over time, even if there are nights where, the kids wake you up, that you're still able to recover from that and not kind of string together a whole bunch of bad nights, but maybe just one or two a week or something like that. Another reason that people are having poor sleep is that they just want an hour to themselves. So they've worked all day, they have the kids at home, the kids are in bed, and finally they've got some peace and quiet. And so now they stay up that extra hour. Whereas, probably what would be best for them, that they would feel, more rested and all that good stuff, is if they did go to sleep when their kids went to bed. But as I say, that is something that needs some convincing. If I just say go to sleep earlier, that's not always well received. And then I was just looking at a study today because I kind of get in a rabbit hole when I start looking up the topics that I want to talk about. Is that there was a study done in 2018, and it was correlating that low levels of vitamin D were correlated with poor sleep quality and shorter sleep duration. So if you have a lack of vitamin D, you're not sleeping as well, and you're sleeping a shorter amount of time. So that's crazy to me, because honestly, like, if you live in North America, you're probably vitamin D deficient. I think you should still get tested and just verify to make sure, the dosing that you're doing is correct and all that good stuff. However, that's most of us, right? We don't go outside as much as we think that we do. And to get the amount of vitamin D that you would require daily, you'd have to be outside with minimal clothing on for at least 15 to 20 minutes with the sun in its midpoint, so like midday essentially. So this doesn't really happen. So you can imagine that just this small factor, again, that we have control over. So again, if your kids are waking you up, work is crazy and you have to work longer hours, at least if you have this one little thing kind of checked off the list, then it can help you in the long run. Okay, so that now we're going to switch gears and talk a little bit about what happens when you do have sleep deficiency. And this is where it gets a little bit stressful, because honestly, sleep affects every single one of our systems. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but there's no way for you to catch up on sleep. So I'm going to say that again. There's no way for you to catch up on sleep. So not naps, not sleeping more on the weekends, that there's just no such thing, because nighttime sleep has its own magic. So it's part of our biorhythms. It goes through a whole bunch of different levels of sleep, and I won't get into the depths of sleep and all that stuff. But there's a symphony of things that happens in that nighttime sleep that we just cannot get either in naps nor when we catch up on sleep. Because when we are quote unquote catching up on sleep and sleeping in on the weekend, what happens is we're actually throwing off our circadian rhythm, which perpetuates that cycle of going to sleep later, maybe waking up earlier and all that stuff. So just something to bear in mind. So sleep deficiency is linked to many chronic health problems. So we've got heart disease on the list. So that's anything to do with stroke and heart attack. Kidney disease. So that could be that the kidneys are shutting down, that they're not filtering properly. High blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, depression. So this is a massive list, right? And when somebody, for example, gets diagnosed with diabetes or has a heart attack, a chronic lack of sleep is not our first go-to, especially for a heart attack, for example, oftentimes like cholesterol is the first thing to blame, which also is not true, but that's a whole nother podcast. So these are things that we need to start considering. How many years or decades have we been functioning with minimal or suboptimal sleep? And how is that contributing to our long-term health? And naturopathic medicine is all about preventative medicine. So these are the things that we're considering, right? When I have a visit with somebody and I'm talking about their stress level and their diet and their sleep, some people are like, what is the relevance of this? But honestly, it affects absolutely every aspect of your physical and your mental processing, but also is now showing that it is linked with these diseases that come, you know, anywhere from like 20 to 30 years down the road, for example. And so, there was one thing that was actually kind of crazy. So I was reading this article on the NIH, and it was saying that sleep deficiency is also linked to a higher chance of injury, trouble learning, focusing, and reacting. And you might find it hard to judge other people's emotions and reactions. So that part was like eye-opening for me, because imagine that, right? You've had a night of bad sleep, you're probably grumpy, you're tired, you're not as focused. But on top of that, if there's like something going on at work or a coworker, or maybe you're having a little tiff, you're not responding to them in a way that you would if you were well rested. So you could be more irritable, but then you're also reading their emotions and their facial expressions and their body language in a way that is tainted by that lack of sleep. So I'm just thinking to myself, like, holy, how many arguments, how many, disagreements have been just a cause of somebody not sleeping well and misjudging how that interpersonal relationship is with somebody else. And I mean, I'm sure it happens every day, all the time, but it's crazy to me to have that like written out like that, because I was like, whoa, judging somebody's emotions and their reactions, right? And I mean, when I'm sitting with somebody in my office, I'm always looking at their face and their body language and how they're receiving, the information that I'm telling them. Are they understanding? Are they willing to do the homework I'm giving them? Like all that types of things. And I'm thinking to myself, if I'm having a lack of sleep, maybe I'm not reading it properly. So then that affects my job. That affects how effective I am. So these are like super important. And then the next point that they were making is that you may have trouble making decisions, solving problems, controlling your emotions, behaviors, and coping with change. So if you can imagine, kids that have a lack of sleep, they're throwing themselves on the floor, they're screaming, they're crying, they're upset. We have that same response. It might be a little bit more controlled, but we're still experiencing all those things. And then lastly, the sad part of the sleep deficiency is that it is linked to depression, which I had mentioned before, but depression, suicide, and risk-taking behavior. So because your judgment is off, because your focus is off, your mood is down, if this happens chronically, and this is all, I mean, there's many factors that play into depression, but even if this is a contributing factor that we have control over, this is huge in making a difference in how somebody feels. So I was mentioning before that you can't make up for lost sleep. So everyone's like, yep, I'll just nap later, no big deal, sleep in on the weekend. No, this is not going to help you with the benefits that sleep and good quality sleep do for us. So I'll get into that in a little bit, but with the naps, you will feel better. There's no question. Take a 20-minute nap, you're going to feel better. But as I was saying, it does not supply all the benefits of that nighttime sleep. And then as far as making up for it later, it just throws off your whole sleep-wake cycle. So this is where we talk about getting into a routine, waking up at the same time every day and going to bed at the same time every day. And there's about an hour leeway that you can either go to sleep an hour earlier or an hour later, where it doesn't seem to throw off anything. However, if you can get into that routine of every day in and out, waking up, going to sleep, that is the absolute best. So I've talked about all the bad stuff that happens if we're not sleeping. But what is really that sleep is giving to us? We spend often 8 hours of our day in bed sleeping. So what's the purpose? Why are we doing that? So this is a time that we are healing and we're repairing any damage, and this specifically to heart and to blood vessels. So as I mentioned before, there's a relationship between a chronic lack of sleep and heart disease. So you can imagine that if at night when you're sleeping, your heart and your blood vessels are healing and repairing. So if there's any little damage that's happened, that is important to know, right? Because that's where you're hopefully preventing high blood pressure from developing. You're hopefully preventing stroke and heart attack. And so, again, just one of those like mind-blowing things. The other thing is that I had mentioned obesity. So oftentimes when people feel like they have food cravings all the time, they feel like they're mentally not able to restrict themselves from eating a certain thing, even though they want to, but they just feel like that almost addiction feeling. Oftentimes it's because they're actually fighting against their hormones. So in regards to sleep, this is for ghrelin and leptin. There are other hormones involved in that, and also the gut microbiome, but again, that's a different podcast. But the hormones that help you feel full and dictate when you feel hungry, if you have a lack of sleep, the hormone that makes you feel hungry is turned up. So all you're feeling is tired and hungry. And that has a function. When you eat, you have more energy, and it drives you to eat more carbs because same thing, you want that energy, that readily available, those highs, right? But what happens is you end up, eating a ton of maybe sugar or just a bunch of carbs, and then you come down and you crash. So having multiple cycles of this or chronically elevated ghrelin, that's the hormone that makes you feel that hunger, that will, again, you're eating even though you are not necessarily hungry or that you need those calories or that nutrients. It's a hormonal drive that is causing it. So again, that is huge, and also understanding our food seeking behaviors, right? Not only like our emotional food seeking behaviors, but also the hormonal aspect of it as well. The other thing too is that when you have that lack of sleep, you're starting to have insulin resistance, and that's where we have those links with the diabetes I was talking about. So your blood sugar actually ends up being higher than normal, and chronically elevated blood sugar levels like that, you're starting to have that insulin resistance, and then you're getting into that cycle of your blood sugar always being high and your body not responding to it the way it should. Now you can counteract that with exercise. So, even if you have a lack of sleep and you do tend to eat more carbs, if you exercise, you're actually helping yourself move through that. And again, just one of those interesting things that sleep helps us with. And then, especially for kids and teens, that's where the growth is happening, growth and development, physical and mental, so brain development. In adults, it's more focused on like injury recovery, repair. There is a role in puberty and fertility. The puberty piece is like where growth hormone comes in and all that good stuff. Fertility is interesting because we're seeing a lot more cases of infertility and unknown cause, right? Like it's not that, there's anything wrong with the reproductive system of either partner, everything is coming back normal. But the links with the fertility and sleep are starting to come out. And so that too is again, is part of our lives, right? Like for us to have kids and to, keep that going and not have to use IUI or IVF, considering sleep as a factor is huge. The impacts on your immune system. So, chronic sleep deprivation, and then like one person sneezes on you, and that's it, game over. You're like super sick. So, but that's like the other thing. If you're sleeping well, you can tolerate being around people that are sick because your immune system is just it's got its its fighting gloves on, and so yeah. That's what I wanted to say about that. Oh, and I also was reading this other study, and I think it was a mouse study. So bear with me. The reason we do these sleep deprivation tests on mice is because it's super unethical to do this to a person. And their metabolism is like way faster than ours, so the results come up faster. Anywho, they reduced the sleep in the mice for a third. So whatever sleep that mice need, they cut it down by a third. And they did that for 10 days. And what they saw is that there was DNA damage. So our DNA is like what makes up all of our cells and how we express certain things. And they saw that 247% of the DNA in the liver was damaged, 145% in the gut, and 166% in the lungs. So liver, gut, and lungs. So liver is like the way we process things, we filter out things. The gut is how we digest things, how we process things. And the lungs, so that's part of your immune system, all that good stuff. Now, the percentages are massive, but as I say, mice have a much faster metabolism than we do. But even if let's say we cut it down and we used, that it was 24% of the DNA in the liver was damaged, that's still a lot. If we try to translate that to a human, that is a lot, right? Just from 10 days with a third less of sleep. Like that is, yeah, that's shocking to me. So after several nights of losing sleep, even if it's just 1 to 2 hours, it's as if you have not slept for 1 or 2 days. So that's where all of your processing, your functions, your mood, everything start to come down. I mean, I have way more points, but I'm realizing that I'm running short on time. So what I'm gonna roll up with is that there are many ways to treat insomnia. The one that I use all the time with my folks is acupuncture, because I find that it gets to the root cause, and the root cause being, why exactly is this person not sleeping? Is it a mental emotional thing? Is it pain? Is it, whatever it may be? That's my go-to. If that, and maybe a supplement if it's really severe. Other than that, the medications that you get for insomnia, they're only meant to be used very infrequently, because you can get a dependence, meaning that you feel like you have to use this to sleep. And so most of them you're not supposed to use beyond 2 weeks. But meditation, deep breathing, no screens before bed. Now, it used to be that it was 1 hour before bed. Now they're actually saying it's 2 to 3 hours before bed. But you can mitigate that with blue light blocking glasses. And and then especially keeping your room quiet, cool, and dark. And there was also another study I was reading that people that have even just a little bit of light while they're asleep at night, so let's say you have like a lamp on in your room, they had a 65% increased chance of developing depression after 2 years. So make sure that your room is dark. You just need that sleep. It does affect how you get into sleep and the depth of sleep that you can get. So going for walks, what are you supposed to do in that 2 to 3 hours without screens? Go for a walk, play cards, call a friend, do a craft, have a hot shower or bath, listen to a podcast. There's lots of things that you can do. But the main thing is that you can't make up for lost sleep. You are affecting literally your mental, emotional, and physical being if you are getting poor quality sleep over days. Make sleep a priority. Keep a routine. And if you can, get some blue light blocking glasses, because they truly do actually make a difference. So they're worth the investment. So I just want to thank you guys for joining us today. It was a big topic. There were still many more things I wanted to talk about, but again, I'm just going to have to wait till next time. Next podcast, it's going to be September 29th. We're going to be talking about allergies and everything associated with those. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to let me know on Instagram or on my Facebook, and I'm happy to answer any of your questions. Thanks so much, guys.